Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Let's start with making dua, inshallah, and then continue. Ameen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Allahumma anta as-salam wa minka as-salam. Tabarakta ya dhal jalali wal ikram. Allahumma rabbana zidna ilman nafi'a وعملا متقبلا ورزقا واسعا وشفاء من كل داء سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم فسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وقال رب اشرح لي ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. We stopped on page 406 and we are talking about Dawud alayhi salam and our topic on beliefs, aqaid, and we are looking at Dawud alayhi salam and the transition to Prophet Sulaiman. But on the story of David at the end of what we have spoken so far was that David alayhi salam was the one who was the young man who went and faced Goliath, who was Jalut. And he did not go there just to face any battle, but he went there to carry news about his brother who was in battle. He was just there for the what? Young boy anxiety situation. But eventually, because of his courage and because of his what? Desire and zeal, he fought Goliath. And no other of the 300 remaining from the 60,000 decided to do that. Except who? David. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instilled in David and Dawud alayhi salam that courage, and after that he succeeded from Talut, Prophet Saul, and also in the companionship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmat and mercy, becoming the prophet as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed on David prophethood as well as kingship. And at this point we turn to page 406, where we said that Dawud alayhi salam or David had received the Zabur or the Psalms as the form of revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This Psalm, David alayhi salam or Dawud, he would recite this as this horse was being saddled. And from the time the horse was saddled to the horse was completed in being saddled, he would have already recited it. Such a voice that the mountains and the birds and the other creatures used to follow him in the recitation of it. Such a sweet voice. So the Quran mentions on page 406, and it says, the Holy Quran also states, O David, we have appointed you as a Khalifa on the earth, and so judge between the people with justice, and do not follow vain desires, lest it leads you astray from the way of Allah. Surely those who go astray from the way of Allah, for them awaits a severe chastisement as they forgot the day of reckoning. Surah Sa'ad, Surah 38, verse 26. Here in this ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to him the quality of what? Khilafat. He is the Prophet of Allah, he is the king, and he is also what? The Caliph. Khilafat is a quality that is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and was only given to two prophets. David was one and the one to succeed, which we will come to just now. But David, who have been blessed with this Khilafat, he has been given the authority, and Khilafat is such a state that one rules, but rules by the laws that is set by Allah. He establishes his kingdom and rulership based on the laws that governs from Allah. So he does not make his own decisions alone, but he confirms his decisions based on what Allah has revealed and what Allah has given to him by means of wahi or revelation or by ilham, whatever form it comes to him. This is the matter in which he dealt with every affair. So, what incident in this Allah wants to draw us attention to, and many other incidents. One of them being, besides Adam alayhi salam, the Holy Quran has only given the title of Khilafah to Dawud. So from Adam, the next to have received such a title was David. From amongst the messengers, he was that person. The wisdom for this could probably be that because David was granted both prophethood and kingship against the custom that prevailed for centuries among Banu Israel, it was therefore essential to call him by such a title that explicitly manifests the attributes of knowledge and power of Allah. David alayhi salam, being a prophet and being a person of devotion and fearing Allah, was the role model for justice. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him khilafat based on the part that he was one who was in obedience to Allah. Such obedience we had spoken about, where he used to be the one who would fast every alternate day. One day in, one day out. His ibadat was also in the night. His strength and his strength of a believer, which will come to when his son is being given the title of prophethood, we'll be mentioning about that. But ibadat in the night is a very important part of the life of a believer. So David decided on many cases, disputes, and other relations, social and religious matters of his people. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu narrates that once two men came to him with a dispute regarding a bull. Each one claimed the bull to be his and the other to be a thief. So this was the occasion. The other one said that the bull is his, and each one calling the other to be what? A thief. Each claimed to be the bull his and the other to be a thief. Dawud alayhi salam delayed the decision till the next day. The next day, he told the plaintiff that Allah has revealed to me that he should be killed. In other words, the person who came and complained to David, listen, this man has stolen my bull. You know, he's calling me a thief. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to David, as we say, he does not make decision except by the commands of Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealing to him the decision. So in this case, he says, all right, this is the person that what? Should be killed. What is the condition? He must be killed. Strange enough, he should therefore admit the truth. So now he told, the plaintiff said, O true prophet of Allah, I am completely truthful in this case of mine. In other words, he's saying, I am talking the truth, you know. I am saying what is the truth in this matter. I made the complaint, yes, and I'm saying that this person over there, he is the thief. But my complaint is the truth. So David told him what? Confess the truth, because Allah told me to kill you instead. But if he is the truth, the person speaking the truth, why should Allah what? Command him to be killed. And so it is said, but before this dispute, I deceived and murdered the defendant's father, which was not known to whom? Him. All right, so he committed the act of murder. On hearing this, Dawud alayhi salam ordered the plaintiff to be executed as retribution for the murder he had committed. What a case. A case without what? Having evidence of the murder, but yet the jurisdiction and the judgment that was passed was for what? They just came to talk about what? The thieving of a particular bull. That's not a big case. But to come and hear the judgment, that was the fear. The fear that the judgment now brought the truth to light. So which proved in this instance that the case that was judged and the answer that is given on the verdict was not just based on bringing proof or getting evidence, but was based on divine revelation coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because David did not have cameras set up at every corner or shop. He did not have spies on the streets looking for anyone who committed a crime to bring the news to him. But when it came to him and the judgment was passed, you know that this, what was passed, is not just of his own, but it came from Allah. It came from Allah. And this is just an incident between the relationship between man and Allah, and the relationship between man as well and another human being. Imagine this condition. It so happens that Allah can reveal to one person the nature and the condition and the behavior of someone, of an incident that he hides from the rest of mankind. On the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we mentioned, last week we talked about the tafsir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not do what? He will not ask us our crime. Our crime will manifest on us. Our sins and our wrongs will manifest themselves on us. So there will be no need for such. This is how scary it is about that day of judgment and how we live our life on this earth. To page 407, it mentions here, before his death, in his short period as a prophet and a king, he ruled over Syria, Palestine, East Jordan, and the area between Aqaba till the Euphrates. He also blessed by Allah with Sulaiman alayhi salam as a son. So David was blessed with Sulaiman alayhi salam as a son. So the Holy Quran, it states, and remember Dawud and Sulaiman when they were adjudicating about the tillage, when the goats of the people wandered therein grazing, and we were witness to their judgment. So we enabled Sulaiman to understand it and to teach one of them. We gave wisdom and knowledge. Surah Anbiya, Surah 21, verse 78. Now, before the death of David, he had a son, Sulaiman. Sulaiman was amongst the sons of David. He's not just the only son, but one of the sons. So, he is Sulaiman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions him in the Quran and reference to it in a particular manner. What he says, and remember David and Sulaiman when they adjudicated about a tillage, about a land and its cultivation, and about the crops in that land, when the goats of the people wandered and therein grazed, and we witnessed. So the goats went and ate out what? All the man crops. Now there's a decision in the court of David now. And what was the decision? Ibn Abbas and Qatada radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrated that the two persons came to David alayhi salam. One of them had a flock of goats, and the other one owned a field on which he grew crops. The latter made a complaint against the former that his goats entered his field at night and ate up his crops. So he went to David in the court and is saying, now listen, this man, his goats came, eat out all my crops. This is the condition is before me now. It appears that the respondent accepted the petitioner's complaint, and presumably the value of the flock of goats were equal to the value of the crops. So the value of the flock of goats was equal to the value of the crops. And the man agreed, yes, my goats went and eat out everything. Dawud alayhi salam announced his judgment that the owner of the goats should give his entire flock to the other man in compensation for his loss. He says this is the law. But you have to do what? Take your flock of goats, give it to the man. This judgment was in line with the religious jurisprudence, which requires that if goods valued by a price are destroyed by someone, the amount of compensation will be determined according to that price. So equal amount. In this case, the value of the crop was the same as the value of the flock. Hence the judgment. When these two men emerged from the court of Dawud alayhi salam, they went by Sulaiman, they met Sulaiman at the door. He inquired from them about the judgment of their case. So he asked them, well, my daddy passed law. What judgment he passed for you? Which they related to him. After hearing the judgment, he remarked that if he were the judge, so if he was the judge in this case, his verdict would have been different. His verdict would have been different, which would be to the benefit of both parties. So you say, if I was the judge, my verdict would have been different and would have benefited both parties. So what did happen? He says, in such a case, then he went to his father, Dawud alayhi salam, and repeated the same thing. What he said? That after hearing the judgment, he remarked that his judgment in his case would be, the verdict would be different, which would be the benefit to both parties. And when he went to his father, Dawud, he repeated the same thing to him. He said, if I come to, I hear the case, but for me, I would have done the case in a different manner. Thereupon, Dawud alayhi salam inquired from him as to what kind of verdict he had in mind. So he told him, well, all right, you're not the judge here right now, but at least, well, let me hear what is his judgment. Let me hear what you have to say. Thereupon, Dawud alayhi salam inquired from him, and he replied that it would be more just and equitable if the flock of goats is given to the owner of the field so that he could use to his own benefit their milk, wool, etc. And his field is given to the goatsman who should cultivate it and grow crops in it. So they should exchange now. When the field returns to the same condition it was before it was eaten by the goats, then the two men should get back their respective properties. Dawud alayhi salam approved this judgment and called back the two men and announced the second judgment to them. This judgment, subhanallah, lucky thing it wasn't murder. In the case, I pass a death sentence. But the case here is what? And look at the wisdom of Dawud and look at the wisdom of Sulaiman. Now, it's not that Sulaiman passed a law. He didn't pass the law. He was asked what he would have done, Sulaiman alayhi salam, what he would have done. So his father asked him, you tell me what you would have done. Now, what did Dawud see in Sulaiman that he called back these two men? In other words, you have a son or you're growing up a child with you, and you have many other sons. But this son gives an advice, and you accept the advice, and you call back the man, and you change your judgment. He saw in him the wisdom that he himself possessed. He saw in him the divine inspiration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that would allow him to make such a decision that will benefit both parties. It's not that Dawud's decision was wrong. It was absolutely correct. And it is not that David's decision or opinion was not a good opinion. It was not that anyone was not going to lose. The man who lost his field would have at least enjoyed wealth for a particular period of time. While the person, on the other hand, who damaged the crops and who are the goats, will now have to work and replace it, but he will not end up being a loser. In other words, the person, if he gives the goats to him, he will have the goats plus what? Plus the field. He cultivates the field, he gets the field plus what? The goats. He keeps the goats. So David's decision is right based on the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's no two ways about that, because compensation for the crop, even though you grow a second crop, does not mean that you did not lose the value of the first or initial crop. That compensation was not what? Was not determined by that. It was determined by the value based on the animals. What is being considered here now is a level of what? Where you call, we give concession, or we give a leeway, or we allow some level of, where we give a level of respite to someone to catch themselves. And that is the case here. Both judgments were correct in their respective rights. The verdict passed by Dawud alayhi salam was strictly judicial, whereas the judgment made by Sulaiman alayhi salam was in the nature of compromise between the two parties. Sometimes this helps both parties and also strengthens their relationship. And this is a very good gesture as well, because sometimes in our communities, everything is not a matter of what? Who is right and who is wrong. Sometimes we pass judgment and we end up creating what? Bigger friction, bigger what? Separation, bigger enmity, because the person feels as though he did not get proper judgment. And sometimes compromise helps in bringing and facilitating and building the relationship between these two people. So just imagine this person on the other hand, this had happened to him. He lost all his goats. He might hold this in mind. For this person, all of his life, look, this person, he got back his field, he got back his crop growing. He had all these goats that was mine, that I take all my time to rear and bring. For one little thing, it happened, yes, I admit it. And now what? I have nothing to show for it. Now on the other hand, he said, well, yes, my goats did this. Yes, it is right for I to do what? Plant it back, get back to status, and at least I still have what? My goats in my hand. And the brother was still had that consideration that at least, I could have what? Done something that will benefit both of us. So, in other words, it shows that Islam, and this is part of our deen, that we as Muslims ought to realize that there are certain things, yes, there's definitely where there is no what? Where there is no what? Room for compromise. But there are things and conditions where there are room for compromise in our religion that would make life better for each of us. Make life better for each of us. Simple thing. We have a piece of land, neighbors, we living together. So some problem happens with the bong, we put up a fence, we put up something growing in the next piece of land, some kind of thing like that. For 4 inches now, or 10 inches of land, you tell your man, no, break down your whole wall and break down all this and move it out from here. For what? 6 inches or 5 inches of land, because you want to pass your what? Fence wall directly in front of this place. Who tell you to build that there? You had no right to build that there? Break it down. Now, I ain't saying you don't have the right to do that. You might have the right to do that, because it's your land, the man build it on. But at the same time, if there is a room for compromise and it's not affecting you directly, why fight or why make this big amount of what? Conflict and destruction amongst yourself, and you are neighbors to each other. Just give the 4 inches of land, shift your wall, put it up and just go your way. Oh, you're looking for beautification, it must be straight, it must line up good. We must know where there's room for compromise, which might even build a better relationship between that person. And it is not an easy thing, but sometimes there is room for this. And if we can't even see through this, then something is wrong with our own minds. If we cannot see through this. But then, in our society today, Muslims or non-Muslims or whatever the case is, land is what? Land. And that is it. Yeah. So this is the nature that we have to look at. Because sometimes, sometimes you buy land, you'll buy a piece of property, and you move into the property, And when you survey the land, you realize that the neighbor already had what? So much inches inside. Or that corner went in so. And you have a neighbor on the next side so. So what you going to tell everybody now? You now come to the community to what? Develop, to live. You're going to start a fight for what land? Can't start on the what? Wrong foot. You have to at least make some kind of room for compromise. So there are cases where such things will be needed. And it is, a good incident the Quran mentions to us. It mentions this in the Quran, that the decision between David and Sulaiman. So if we see people in this kind of condition, quote this ayat of Quran for them. Surah Anbiya, Surah 21, verse 78. Tell them this is an incident mentioned in the Quran. On what? Compromise. How to use compromise. But as I said, there are certain matters that there is no compromise on, and there are matters we can compromise and make what? Agreement upon. All right, inshallah, we'll stop there today in our notes on page 407. We completed. So next week we'll start page 408, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Surah Rahman, we have been discussing in this particular chapter of the Holy Quran on the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah who is Ar-Rahman. He had described in this surah a number of incidents for us. And more so in particular, he describes the categories of people with Iman, and he also describes the people who are the deniers of Allah, the unbelievers of Allah, who do not accept the ayats of Allah, the signs of Allah, the verses of Allah, the words of Allah, the books of Allah, who refuse to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had described, when we had looked at from verse 41 onwards until we reach, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described in this section about the people before this whom were considered to be the people of the fire fell. And that was from verse, which ended on verse 45, I think. Which had mentioned yet from verse 44, yes, which speaks about the whole incident about the unbelievers, where they actually what? Allah described their position when they will be going into hell, and what they will be drinking of the boiling water in hell, and all of these things mentioned about them in the fire of hell. I'm not going to repeat the whole exercise on those verses, but in conclusion to that, and starting where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the people of Liman Khawfa Maqama Rabbi Janatan, the people who are God-fearing, Udda bin Ghazwan radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he narrates and tells us, and gives the report about once what took place in the time of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions. And that one whom? Utbah. What was the condition of Utbah when he was giving a sermon in reference towards this place called the life of the hereafter? And this is what we're really talking about, because in Surah Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draws reference to the hereafter for the believers and the unbelievers. And he draws reference to this because the place for the preparation for the hereafter is not after death. It is while we are alive and here. So Utbah, he gives this narration, and he announces and tells us of what he says. And he says, verily this world has already announced its termination. He says in his sermon, he says, this world has already given announcement of its end. How? The splitting of the moon was a sign that the world has already given its announcement that its end is here. The coming of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a sign that the end is also here. It is as though he is saying that the earth has already poured out every single thing of water from it. But what remains, like when you drink something and you have a little, the dregs, we call it drops, the last few drops, that is the last things that is holding on to the end of time. So he says that the world has reached a state where it is actually pouring out its last few drops. This is the state or the nature of the world today. This is how Utbah describes it. And he says, all that is left of her is like the residue that is left of a few drops. And the people, they are moving over here to places and will never come to an end. They're continuously what? Striving for what? The last few drops. We are struggling behind what? In these last few moments of time, trying to grab at things, even though it's coming to an end. It's like as though your house is on what? Fire. But you're trying to move out the fridge and the TV, and you're trying to move out all the valuable things that have no value. Because if the house finish and you end up with no clothes, or you end up with no food, but you walk outside with what? The TV. What condition you're going to be in? So he's saying we are struggling in this world. We are struggling with the end of time, and we are grasping at things in this end of time that has no use in the hereafter. This is how he puts it across. But yet, man, this is the effort we are making day out, day in, day out, knowing the end is near, but this is the effort that he's making. This is the effort and the tireless effort that he's making. And what is the end result? The end result would be, when we look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning here and describing of the life which is to come, and the time for it to take place is very near. Which one of the ships you are on? Are you on Jannatan, the two gardens, either of these gardens, or are you in the path of what? Jahannam, hellfire. And how long do you have to wait again? He's saying, the train is almost ready to leave. The last few drops of water for this change to take place is almost there. What are we doing? What are we really doing with our life? He says, I have seen in the time when he and the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam were used to be enjoying in the battlefield and they used to go out in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, 1 out of 7 people, I was one of those 7 people with the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the food that we had to eat on those days, it was leaves. It was leaves. And we had to eat the leaves of trees for day in, day out, until the point come that our mouth, the gum, the inside layer of the mouth, it came into sores, tired of chewing what? Leaves. This is the life that we live in the life of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his time, struggling in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says what? These days are over for us. Now we are enjoying governorship. He says, now I am enjoying what? Governorship. I have authority at my hands. I have power in my hands. But do you know what I pray for today? I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala maintains me with the taqwa that I had at the time of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what time we are talking about? What type of time we are talking about? We are talking about the time that he lived with the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he made mujahada and jihad with Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was walking in the path with Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How close a time? A time that is like, it is no difference in the time. The place and time was around the same occasion. He's just talking about the time that just passed of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was in fear. He was in fear because he says a time will come that when these same position, people will take it and make mulkiyat out of it, kingship out of it. And it came to pass. It came to pass that they made what? Kingship out of it. He saw this happening. He saw when the wealth and the power started to get to the heart. And what was this condition he said before? The world is on its dregs, its last few drops to end. And he's seeing people making this thing. You know, one of the Sahabas, they also mentioned, he said, people today, you know, they live in this world in such a condition. Their life is getting shorter and they are happy. They are happy. What they are happy about? They are achieving things in life. Even though their life is getting shorter, they are feeling what more? More comfortable. Because now they grow more comfortable in life. But in fact, they are only getting better in what? Leaving things behind. But the time they have to prepare for the hereafter is get shorter. So the worry today is not a worry. Today the worry is to reach comfort and get happy. But if we think about death coming closer, we now start to what? Worry. We now start to build what? The concern. Because every day that goes by is a lesser opportunity for the life of the hereafter. So in Surah Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala firstly engages the attention of the believers. Listen, O mankind, listen to the bounties of Allah upon you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given unto us all of these things. He's engaging our attention to the point that he draws reference to the people who will be heading towards the fire of hell, what condition they will be in. And then he speaks about here from verse 47 onwards, when he speaks about 46 onwards, وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. For that one who fears meeting Allah, there is two gardens. لِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. Allah says for him, فَبِأَيْ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. What fear? The fear of meeting Allah. This is the fear that we must have every moment of our life. This fear must never leave us. Because we are talking about that emotion, that time when it comes to us, it is coming towards an everlasting life. We are going to meet Allah, and Allah is going to bring to us the condition of the life that we live in this world. That is the fear. That is the fear of our judgment. And not a judgment for a small petty crime in this life, where we can buy a judge and get away with it. Or we can buy our future in front of a judge because we had usurped so much wealth from the people that we can take the opportunity now and say, what, here lawyer or judge, take this money and decide, pass my case and let me go. This cannot happen in that life. This cannot happen there. لِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. If we really fear Allah and the meeting of Allah, we will straighten our lives. We will straighten our lives. Because that day, there is no bribe. That day, there is no condition of what? Anyone to do anything for us, except that we had the mercy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as an intercessor for us. But in part of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not describing about the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam here. He's talking about the individual himself. You, O mankind, if you are really in fear of this day, then Allah says, for you, Allah will give you and prepare for you to paradise, to Jannah. Jannatan. Because you made the effort. You control your life. You control your behavior. Despite every single little what? Condition that comes for you, you change. You know why? Because taqwa is such a condition that, yes, today I am what? Being conscious. I fear Allah. Alhamdulillah, my day was good today. I did not do a wrong thing. Tomorrow comes. You get a big job. And what happens? Allah tests you to see how much you are going to what? Withhold your eyes from what? Not taking things that are not yours. Allah tests you that I have a big job today, but I don't have time to what? Pray. So the taqwa now comes to what? Test. Whether or not you're going to be continuously obedient in life. And this is how it is day in, day out in our lives. And it's going to continue like this every day until Allah is ready for us. Every day until Allah is ready for us, this test is going to come every day. And we have to see how we are going to end up. Liman khafa rabbi, that one who fears meeting Allah, what he will do every day that comes in his life. That is the biggest challenge with our taqwa. He says, in such a condition, Dhawata afnan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, both of these gardens shall be filled with branches. فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. And which we did last week, already tafsir on that. فِيهِمَا عَيْنَانِ تَجْرِيَانِ. And in both of them there shall also be springs, which we also mentioned about last week. I'm not going to repeat those ayats and the meaning of them again. And then he mentions again, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّ. In it also, فِيهِمَا كُلِّ فَاكِهَةٍ زَوْجَانِ. Fruits of two different flavors. Fruits of different flavors. The same fruit in pairs. Some of them will be what? One taste that we are accustomed to, and one will be what are more sweeter, or take that taste of that same fruit that you are never accustomed to. Or it could be some fruits that may be what? Dried, and some may be what? Fresh and green. And then he mentions, after mentioning about the garden, he says, muttaki'ina ala rabbikuma tukadhiban. And in this garden, he mentions again for us here in this ayat, so which of the favors of Allah would you deny? And then he says, muttaki'ina ala furushim bata'ina istabrakim wal jannatan idan. And on this garden as well, in verse 54, he says that there are couches which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made for us to recline on. Muttaki'ina. And this is the ayah that we completed last week. He gives the indication to us in this paradise, it is such a comfortable stay. فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Then which of the favors of Allah would you deny? Then he draws reference to the next verse. فِيهِنَّ قَاصِرَةُ الطَّرْفِ لَمْ يَطْمِثْهُنَّ إِنسٌ قَبْلَهُمْ وَلَا جَانٌ. And in this paradise, there is woman in this Jannah whom man and jinn has never touched. فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. He gives this reference to these women of paradise who man and jinn has never touched. Then which of the favors of Allah would you deny? كَأَنَّهُنَّ الْيَاقُوتُ وَالْمَرْجَانِ. He describes these women in such a condition. He says that these women in paradise, they seem to appear like rubies and pearls. كَأَنَّهَا يَاقُوتُ وَالْمَرْجَانِ. Such beautiful women in paradise. Then which of the favors of Allah would you deny? Now, I want to draw reference to one thing about this. You know, people in the world today use these ayats of the Quran and say that Muslim leaders at times in some parts of the world gravitate to use these ayats to young boys to tell them, if you blow up yourself or you commit the act of, suicide bombing, you are going to enjoy in paradise these beautiful women. This is what? This is the claim that they make. So that these men are gravitated, these young boys are gravitated to go and do these actions. This is what is reported. This is what we see on television. This is what we hear on news. This is what we read on news. But the reality is, this ayat is far away from the idea that is being made as a propaganda. This, what he is hearing and seeing, is mere propaganda to the reality of the situation. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say this. What he said in reference to this ayat, وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّةً. Who fears Allah, who fears meeting his Lord, this is one of the reward. Not to go and do what? Blow up yourself and call us what? The reward. What is the reality of the nature of these boys? Allahu alam, Allah knows best. But the reality is that some places and the condition that these people face is that sometimes their families, they see them murder before their very eyes. They see their own father and mother and their homes being destroyed before their very eyes. It is not a matter about Jannatan and the hurs in Jannah, but it is a matter of the condition of the lives that they have to live. It does not give warranty or justification for the action, but the type of life that they have to live also determine some of the mentality and the conditions that they have to face. We are only seeing the side that people give the propaganda story about. But the other side of the story is who knows the condition and the life of these young men and families that they go through these conditions, and what do they hope to live for? What does life offer them? What does it have in the future for them to hold? If they cannot earn a living, if they have to live on the streets, if they have to eat out of garbage cans, if they cannot get a livelihood, if they cannot maintain a family life, if they cannot even have the comfort of a home, then what type of a life they have in this world if they are subjected towards the life of being forced to live as though they have no meaning to live. That is what the conditions are before them. That is what will drive people to states that they may be in. Allahu alam, Allah knows best their condition. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on them and on their conditions, inshallah. We pray for them continuously that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would change their hearts and change their conditions that they are in, inshallah. So no one should ever use the ayats of Allah in the condition or to even use it for propaganda or for the purpose of saying that this is the reason why. No Muslim ever should even think about this is the reason why they want to go to Jannah. In other words, this should not be the purpose of entering Jannah, but the condition is that this is a part of the package for what? Liman khafa maqama rabbihi jannatan. If you fear Allah, this is one of the rewards when you will enter into paradise. This is one part of the reward of Jannah, because this is nothing in comparison to the Ridwan Allah, the sight of Allah. Seeing Allah is beyond any type of benefits that one will get in Jannah. Even this is nothing in comparison to that. The Ridwan Allah, people will spend years upon years looking at Allah, forgetting about everything else in this world, in the Jannah that they are receiving. They'll forget about all the gardens, all the trees, all the houses, all the fruits, all of the couches, all of the women of paradise. They'll forget all about these things. When they would come in the sight of Allah, the Ridwan Allah, everything else is forgotten. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He asks them, what do you desire more? And when they would see Allah, they forget all their desires. All of the desires are quenched with Ridwanullah. So we should not be fooled into believing or into thinking about anything else when it comes to the ayats of Allah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes this in the manner, in the sequence and in the order for those who fear Allah and the meeting of Allah. And Allah says, Hal jaza'ul ihsan illa al ihsan. He starts this section by saying, Liman khafa maqama rabbihi jannatan. Who fears Allah? And He says, for that fear and for the good that you do, Hal jaza'ul ihsan illa al ihsan. What is the reward for good other than good? Hal jaza'ul ihsan illa al ihsan. You do good and Allah will give you good. You live a righteous life, Allah will keep you on that righteousness. And mind you, righteousness is not comforts. People think when you live a righteous life and are worshiping Allah and are still not seeing my way. You know what they're not seeing their way? They're thinking, well, like, no, me getting my money in my pocket. I get in a car. I get in my house. So all the praying are really working. All the du'as and zikr are really working. All the tilawat of Quran are working. If this is success, is this the ibadat? Is this the fear of Allah? Hal jaza'ul ihsan illa ihsan? What is the good? The good is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, these things that I promise you, I am going to give it to you when you fear me and you restrict your life in obedience to me, despite the many tests that I give to you, the things that you desire of this life. If it is not granted to you, it is not that I don't want to give it to you, but if it is given to you, your life might become the worst thing ever existing. Be careful of it. Be mindful of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He loves you, He knows what is good for you. And therefore, we should not become despondent in our ibadat and our worship to Allah because we are deprived of something, or we think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not hearing my dua, or Allah is not hearing my supplication. Hal jaza'ul ihsan illa al ihsan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us on that day, when He gives us these rewards and He shows us what is before us for our good deeds, then all He cries for the things of this life that we made, we ask and cry for anything of this life. We would have wished that we would have cried more for things in Jannah. We would have wished and cried that we wanted more things in Jannah than asking for anything of this life. Hal jaza'ul ihsan illa al ihsan fa bi ayyi ala'i rabbikuma tukadiban. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. صدق الله صدق رسوله الكريم. جزاك الله خير. Let us join in making dua inshallah. Ameen. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. فسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
You were born on a globe.